Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Net Zero at the Centre of the Social Value Movement session. Just give it a couple of minutes as people join in. For those of you who haven't joined one of these before, there's a chat function to the right-hand side. We encourage you to ask us questions throughout. We've got some dedicated time towards the end of the session to answer them, which would be great. Joined by an amazing panel today, and I'm really excited for the discussion that we're going to have. So you can see by the title, it's on Net Zero at the Centre of the Social Value Movement. What we mean by that, and to frame the session, is around the Social Value Act and how subsequent reforms have given procurement a new purpose, and we can now go further. So our discussion today will be centred around how the spirit of the Social Value Act can drive progress on net zero, the benefits and impact that this can have, and the practical steps that you can take to achieve this. So yeah, please encourage questions throughout. We're going to start the session off today with a round of introductions, and I'll introduce you to all of our panel and the wonderful work that they're doing, and then we'll go into some of the questions that we prepared. So I'll kick things off and introduce myself. So if we could go to my introduction slide, please. So nice to meet you all. So I'm Ben Tuck. So I work for E.ON as a social value and PMO lead on the Coventry Strategic Energy Partnership. I think some of you may be wondering why an energy company is here and so passionate about talking about net zero. And I think it comes back to, I guess, E.ON's commitment. At the heart of E.ON's purpose is to make new energy work. And what we mean by this is actually the transition to a cleaner, fairer energy system must work for every household, business and community. It's E.ON's purpose, but it's also at the centre of the work that I'm doing with the Coventry Energy Partnership. And this is a 15-year partnership with E.ON and the City Council to look holistically at the energy needs across the city, residents, business, communities and infrastructure to make energy more affordable and sustainable. I'm really proud to say actually that social value is at the heart of everything that we do in this partnership and makes up 2 of our 4 strategic pillars. So one of those pillars being jobs and skills and the others around community benefit. Some of our highlights to date in the first 2 years of this partnership is we've delivered 1.6 million of social value through the TOMs. We've engaged over 2,000 school children with hands-on workshops on net zero, activities, murals and career sessions. The wider E.ON is committed to making new energy work. As part of our £2 billion, we've got a UK investment plan until 2028. This is tangible investments in renewable energy and flagship projects such as the Silvertown Ectogrid, which cut emissions by up to 88%, grid-scale battery storage like we've got in Uskmouth, and the Port of Liverpool's rooftop solar hub, which is one of the UK's largest installations of its kind. Looking through the community and residential lens, we've had an amazing affordability scheme in 2024, which helps support over 80,000 households with debt relief. And also, in addition to that, we've helped 89 communities through our MBS Foundation, with a further £5 million being pledged to help support community projects. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll be chairing your session today. I'm going to introduce you to the panel now. So first up is John.
We're moving the slide on, Ben. Great to meet everybody. My name's John Steggles. I work for CDW. It's the world's largest IT reseller and absolutely puts our sustainable ambitions at the core of everything we do, which basically means focusing on 4 pillars: our planet program and how we're changing the world one step at a time, what we do for our people, and that we serve, products and portfolio. We've got 5 key things. I'm fully responsible for the definition of our strategy across the entire sustainability and social value arena, and I get the pleasure of driving tactical activation through a matrix of co-workers across our UK and international business. I spend a huge amount of time in front of our customers where I do three things. I tell our story, I understand theirs, and I bring the two together. Meaningful change. As I'm thinking about Dell, HP, and Lenovo, Cisco, and the other global we can working alongside our aspirations, putting on global change that is both pervasive, impactful, and indeed improving trade boards. So whether that is Tech UK's Public Service Board or HPI's Round Table or Lenovo's 360 Forum, where I really have one ambition, and that is to drive radical collaboration, build a single voice to make change in an arena that alone would be difficult, but as a combined boards give me the opportunity to work very closely with governments. So I spent a lot of time with the Cabinet Office, understanding and supporting their development of also value going now with the release of PPN 002 as well. So that is me.
Great, thanks, John. And if we go on to the next slide, we'll introduce us all to Jess.
Hi everyone, hopefully my internet is also going to hold up. Lovely to be here today, thank you for having me. My name is Jess Reddy and I'm the Digital and Alliance Lead at Deloitte UK. And our social impact focus really looks at three key areas: digital exclusion, helping our business and our clients achieve net zero, and helping people develop the skills they need for the future. And as I mentioned, I'm the Digital Inclusion and Alliances Lead, and whilst that might not necessarily seem like a kind of natural bedfellow with net zero, there's a huge amount of intersection between the digital exclusion space, net zero, and of course skills for the future. Alongside my role there, I also look after several of our social value delivery partners who are all focused around the area of digital and skills. And I think today we'll talk about lots of different things, but I guess a reflection from me on the kind of digital inclusion space is that it's essential to help the government meet all 5 of its missions. And the challenge, I suppose, that we have is that digital skills and digital exclusion more broadly isn't hugely woven into the new social value model, despite it actually being a kind of really pervasive issue and would actually be something that helps drive all of the outcomes. I've been doing some work with government, and you'll hear from Ellie shortly, around the government's digital inclusion action plan and the aspirations the government has there, working with public, private and third sector to kind of collaborate on the issue of digital inclusion. And at Deloitte, we contributed particularly to the IT Reuse for Good Charter, which I think Ellie and I will talk to you a little bit about today, and particularly the intersect there between that and net zero. But more on that later. I think I'll move on a little bit more broadly. So I see at Deloitte our huge focus around being a strategic player. So government is ensuring that we can drive social value through all of our work in as much as is practically possible. We have a range of tools that enable us to do that. So particularly in the net zero space, including our sustainable delivery framework, which is really forecasting on us reducing business travel emissions and helping us identify ways that we can reduce those for ourselves, but also from a scope 3 from our clients' perspective, recognising that about 60% of our firm emissions come from our business travel, but also really looking to see how do we embed net zero practices into our work right from the very start. We have a clause in our contracts called Clause 0, which we introduced in March 2023, which is an open discussion with clients, regardless of sector, about how we will ensure that we work in a more sustainable way through the delivery of that contract, through things like reducing travel and making sure that people are only kind of in places for what we call moments that matter. And that's a kind of really collaborative approach. I'm really looking forward to the conversations today, and I think I'm going to hand over now to Rich.
Thank you, Jess. It's great to be here. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to join you all today. I'm Richard Tyrie. I'm the Chief Secretary of GoodPeople. My background is in setting up the first job board in the UK in 1995. And latterly, I set up and ran another job board called Jobs Go Public for 15 years, Jobs Go Public focusing on the public sector. I then had, I guess what I can call an outbreak of purpose. So I set up GoodPeople in 2012 to look at how I could take my expertise in running sort of large scale job board platforms and apply that to delivering social impact. GoodPeople, we work at the intersection of the public, private, and the sort of social sector, the third sector. And in essence, our work is about embedding purpose and social impact into business as usual. Our work is mostly focused on delivering large-scale employment and skills programs for local government, for housing associations. We do lots of work with large-scale property developers and regeneration programs, but we also work for corporate clients as well. Some examples of our work, a local authority program example is Southwark Works. We've been working with Southwark Council for many years, and we've been delivering Southwark Works for a couple of years, where we're focused on I guess residents that face multiple barriers. So think long-term unemployed people, people that are at risk of homelessness, ex-offenders, NEETs, to name a few. We placed about 330 people in the last 18 months. And our job is to go out there and unlock those good jobs, that good work from employers that are really committed to delivering social impact across multiple sectors. For property developers, we tend to work with developers pre-planning and work with them to design social impact strategies that they commit to as part of their planning applications. So an example of the work we've done with developers is our work at the Shard, where we supported 447 local unemployed people into jobs in the Shard. Most were people of colour, most were young people between the ages of 18 to 24. So we designed an impact programme that very much spoke to those local priorities that Southwark had at the time. Now, one of the reasons I'm here, 3 years ago, we began work on net zero. I'm really passionate about the climate. I want to make sure that we leave the world in a slightly better place than how I found it. And I think the transition to net zero offers a once in a generation opportunity for our communities. We can all see that poverty and inequalities on the rise. And we have an opportunity to make sure that we can get our communities ready for the huge volume of jobs that are coming our way. And I think it's really important because helping our communities to navigate the future of work, a changing jobs market, is going to be one of the big social challenges of our time. I won't spend too much time on that now, but work is getting complex to navigate. It's changing really quickly. And the one thing that we can be sure of is that the net zero revolution is going to generate a lot of jobs. So let's make sure our communities benefit from those. Our work on net zero sees us work with local authorities and housing associations on their decarbonisation programs, and typically working with tier 1 and tier 2, 3 sort of suppliers, so big main contracts in their supply chains, and 27 colleges across London to build a talent pipeline so we can make it really simple for organisations to deliver on their social impact targets. So that's me. I'm glad to be here.
Great, thanks, Rich. Good to have you on the panel. And last but by no means least, I'd like to introduce you to Ellie.
Brilliant, thanks, Ben. Hi everyone, my name's Ellie Richardson and I am the head of device donation in the Digital Inclusion and Skills Unit in DSIT, although I think perhaps a more accurate title would be head of device poverty. It's a lot broader than device donation, and our team is a relatively new team. We were set up in July last year, but we have been delivering at pace on digital inclusion and skills interventions. So in February, we published our digital inclusion action plan, which listed our first 5 actions that we wanted to deliver in 2025, and since then we have been delivering on a wide range of interventions, ranging from the most recent Digital Inclusion Innovation Fund, which launched in August, but we have also set up a Digital Inclusion Action Committee chaired by Baroness Armstrong, and more specifically, so in the action plan, we have broken down digital exclusion into 4 pillars: access, digital services, skills, and confidence. And my work focuses particularly on access and resolving digital poverty. As you can see from Jess's slide earlier, there are 1.6 million people who do not have access to a device. So that is a tablet, laptop, or a phone. And we are really trying to ensure that those 1.6 million people do end up with access to a working, suitable device. And within that pillar, we have already set up our cross-departmental pilot with the Digital Poverty Alliance to refurbish end-of-life government laptops and give them to people who need them. And although our work does predominantly have perhaps more of a social value, digital inclusion angle, a lot of the work that we do is inherently net zero as well. And as Jess alluded to, in June, we launched our IT Reuse for Good charter with Good Things Foundation, Deloitte, and Vodafone 3. And the purpose of that is to encourage organisations, whether they're private, public, or third sector, to take a reuse first approach to their IT assets and try to refurbish and donate devices to digitally excluded individuals where they can. So we have done a lot of work on delivering our digital inclusion action plan, and we are now in a space, as still a relatively new team, we are looking forward and seeing what our medium to long-term interventions can be to deliver on digital inclusion measures. And as you can see on the slide, we have a link to the IT Reuse for Good charter, and we will get into it in more depth, but we are very happy to share a link in the chat as well if anyone would like to check out whether their organisation is eligible to become a signatory. And I'm really excited to be here today, so thank you for having me along.
Great, thanks, Ellie. And that ends all our introduction. So really excited on the discussion that we're going to get into now, and also, I guess, the broad views of the panelists around net zero. I'm really intrigued where we get to. So my first question is for you, Rich, and it's going to be around the social value model and how social value model and subsequent PPNs have reframed procurement from being transactional to a tool for wider outcomes. What opportunities do these reforms unlock for embedding net zero at the heart of social value, and particularly in sort of shaping the jobs and skills and investment in local places?
It's a fabulous question, Ben, and to me it is the question. So let's start with the sort of wider, I guess, outcomes this is going to start. I think the social value model and the PPNs are likely to act as a flywheel to affect bigger systemic changes, both behavioural and very practical. I think we're going to see the PPNs start to mainstream and embed social value into multiple business functions rather than just procurement. So think sort of C-suite, strategy, commercial, legal, HR, finance, which is a good thing. Because I think it's going to bring a lot more emphasis on transparency around social value delivery and compliance. You know, we see that there's going to be contract performance notices that are made transparent every quarter. So, you know, if you're going to make commitments around social value, you're going to be held to account for delivering them. And I think those that don't, we're going to see increasing reputational risk. I mean, there's talk of fines or penalties for contractors that don't deliver on these commitments. So I think my hope is that we're going to see that gap close between some of the commitments that are made at the front end of bids and the social value teams that often have to deliver on the promises, and maybe even more investment into internal social value teams. I hope so. From a net zero skills perspective, I think it's really important. And I think just to frame the sort of net zero skills challenge, having been sort of at this now for 3 years, blimey, every day is a school day. the one thing we do know to be true is that without the required skills, net zero will remain an aspiration. You know, we need the workforce to be able to deliver this stuff, and at the moment there is a yawning gap in our delivery capacity. So a step change in our skill system model is required if we're going to meet that future demand. And I think the social value model and the PPNs will start to catalyze more demand-led approaches around building that net zero talent pipeline. If you just take a step back and look at the wider labour market, and we look at built environment skills, now for net zero, a lot of the skills we need will be sort of drawing from the built environment sort of sector. And at the moment, that sector is already facing chronic and acute skills shortages. So I think getting the skills system to become more demand-led is absolutely key to making sure we're training and upskilling the people that we need in the future. And I guess what the procurement's going to do is it's going to start to catalyze reliable demand around net zero roles. And getting those demand signals, if we look at our education and skills sort of partners and colleagues on the ground, getting those reliable demand signals is going to really help that skills system to sort of operate more effectively. And I think what that means in practical terms is tier one contractors and supply chains are going to be increasing their focus on workforce planning. I think we're going to see more investment into the future net zero workforce. And I think that's going to help those education partners understanding what's coming. It's going to help those partners to respond and tailor their provision accordingly. And it also means we can start preparing our communities for the good, sustainable jobs of the future now. I think it's an opportunity to drive proper inclusive growth. Most of the local authorities in the UK have inclusive growth as one of their top 3 priorities. And I think done well, the public sector investment we're going to see in net zero is going to unlock access to that good work that's going to deliver really tangible social and economic benefits. It's going to allow us to deliver really targeted outreach and support. It's going to help us to recruit from specific priority groups, demographics, or even neighbourhoods. I think it's going to see more people with decent jobs. And ultimately, what that's going to mean is people that are healthier, they're more resilient, there's going to be a reduced reliance on public services and cost savings to the public purse. Getting people into good jobs is good for their well-being, and the opposite is also true. But what I'm really excited about is I think we're going to see really radical new forms of collaboration around place. This is an opportunity for commissioners to work together with partners around place, whether they are in the private sector, whether they're in the employment and skills sector, the social sector. I think we're going to see more and better forms of collaboration between different actors around local areas, especially around social value and skills. Because I think every contract is not just going to be a driver of lower emissions. I think it's going to be better jobs and stronger communities. And I think that's something that we can all get behind.
Thanks, Richard. Really like your point there, actually, how this is kind of, it's an enabler in itself to wider social change and social impact, particularly looking at that skills and green skills. I'd like to open this up to the wider panel now to get their thoughts.
I'm happy to come in, Ben, just on a couple of things. I think particularly, absolutely about the opportunity for giving people skills for the future. I think there's also another opportunity for workforces around training and upskilling their own workforce. So in particular, I know at Deloitte, we've got circular economy training, for example, but also understanding how new technology that we're using, so things like generative AI, for example, what is the impact of that and how are we using it in the most kind of efficient and effective way, so we're gaining the benefits from it, but we're not negatively kind of contributing to our net zero targets at the same time. So I think there's a couple of things there about how do we work to give people the skills for the future and future jobs in the green space, but then also conversely, how is that kind of playing back in on those jobs that aren't traditionally in the green space, and then the kind of intersect there as well would just be a couple of points I'd add to that.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, really interesting, actually. What is a green job? And there's a lot of jobs that share similar skill sets that happen to be in a green industry, and how can we make sure that they're contributing to a wider, I guess, green industry as a whole. Ellie, keen to get your thoughts on this one as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And just to build on what Rich and Jess have already said, I think the social value model and the changes that are going on in procurement at the moment do present a real opportunity for changing appetites and providing those incentives as well. I think working in the public sector, something that we have really struggled with in terms specifically within our device donation digital inclusion work, is finding that one person who understands the value of these social and environmental issues. And once you find that person, it can really unlock the rest of the chain, I guess, and bring people along with them. So I think by using the social value model and actually being able to demonstrate to senior leadership that these changes are worthwhile and it will provide those outcomes, such as the skills and the investment, is something that is just so valuable. I know from setting up our own pilot, it was so important to demonstrate to senior leadership that yes, we are making a change to commercial contracts, we are making a change to the digital processes, but ultimately it does deliver so much social value and it does deliver environmental benefits as well. The amount of e-waste that we have saved through the pilot. So I think from a government perspective, the social value model has really encouraged a whole range of colleagues, like Rich said, so commercial, digital, and policy colleagues to think with a broader and more community orientated approach. And it's not just the responsibility of commercial colleagues, those in charge of the contracts, it's the responsibility of like kind of all government officials to think about how can we ensure that there are more positive outcomes for broader society. And I know it's not just DSIT that are thinking about this at the moment, because DEFRA, like I've been working in their digital sustainability working group and their circular economy working group, where they are really looking at how we can embed sustainability and social value in procurement, disposal, and just government processes across Whitehall. So I think it really has inspired a change across all different parts of the civil service and within teams, which is really important as well. It's just a real opportunity to encourage and change appetites.
Great, thanks, Ellie. And I think, yeah, that broader implication and broader impact of social value, I think that brings us really nicely towards my second question, which I'm going to shoot back towards you and towards Jess, which is when we frame net zero through that social value, the benefits then reach far beyond just carbon reduction. So things like the digital device banks that you've mentioned and circular economy. So what are the most powerful ways that net zero delivery can also tackle inequality, improve sort of well-being and strengthen that community resilience?
Yeah, I don't mind going first on this one. And I think, so looking at the work that DSIT has done, like our team, the Digital Inclusion and Skills Unit, framing net zero through the lens of social value and seeing both of them as working hand in hand rather than separate, it's easier and it's important to be able to demonstrate the tangible benefits for wider society in tackling those inequalities that the Social Value Act does list as tangible goals and outcomes. And from a government perspective, obviously one of our big 5 missions is growth, and it is a priority, but it's really key for us that in this increasingly digital world that is very reliant on technology, that we don't leave people behind. And when we wrote our digital inclusion action plan, we devised our pilot, our charter, through this lens of bringing together sustainability and social equality and the benefits and outcomes that we can see from that. And obviously from my perspective, my priority is tackling the issue of those 1.6 million people who do not have access to a device. But we have seen so many sustainable and net zero issues and benefits to see as well. So on device donation, we know that our work can help reduce the 6 million tonnes of e-waste that is generated by the UK every year. That's why we really drove home that statistic in our charter to show that actually there is so much good that can come from having this reuse first approach, especially when we know that there are opportunities to make this change, for example, through refresh cycles. So I guess our overarching approach to those benefits has been that net zero and social value, when brought together, reap mutual benefits. And just to like delve in a bit deeper into our work and the benefits and the opportunities that have come from this, our pilot itself absolutely does reduce carbon emissions, and we made it very clear when we set up this pilot that landfill is the last resort. Like, we do not want to see any government laptops go to landfill. We either want them to be recycled or refurbished and redistributed to those who need them. But as an additional benefit, we have also seen, or we hope to see, that we see less e-waste, reduced carbon emissions, etc. So it's had a multitude of benefits, and we are actually still in the process of calculating the amount of e-waste that we have saved through the scheme. But with real life impact, we've already managed to donate laptops to 191 individuals through the Digital Poverty Alliance, who have been absolutely brilliant. And I think, in terms of what I was alluding to with the previous question and the appetite for change, already we've started to see other departments start to consider how they can bring about those real benefits. So the saving e-waste, and the helping digitally excluded people, like MHCLG have already set up their own scheme. And I know that Cabinet Office, DWP, are already looking at how they can change their contracts to include some form of social value clause, which is really important, like bringing people along for that journey. And I hope Jess doesn't mind, but I'm just going to quickly talk a bit more about the charter as well, because I think that is really where we have started to see the benefits of how government industry collaboration can start to bring about real change. And so the charter, which we launched back in June, we already have 35 signatories, and we are aiming, fingers crossed, for 100 signatories by June 2026. And we want to have a range of signatories from public, private, and third sector. And I think a great thing about social value and sustainability is that it works. From what we've seen in our digital inclusion action plan, we think it works best, those interventions, when they're done on a local level. And we have already seen, even through our innovation fund, that a lot of benefits are felt most when they are felt by local ecosystems, and really are in line with the community wealth building model. And I think what the charter does is that it encourages organizations to really look within their local community, how can they give those devices back and redistribute them, sorry, that's quite a hard word to say quickly, on a local level. And it strengthens those community supply chains, and it's essential for that green circular economy that we really want to see. And we know already that there are brilliant local authorities who are already doing a lot of that. So we've recently been speaking to Trafford Council and Cov Connect, who are taking devices from local organisations, whether that's an NHS trust or a private sector organisation, refurbishing them and donating them free of charge for people who need them. So we see the benefits of obviously saving devices going to landfill and fulfilling that sustainability net zero goals, but also we see people having access to devices and being able to apply for jobs, get their do their schoolwork, that kind of thing. So the charter amplifies this very local approach, which we are trying to encourage through our action plan. And yeah, I think both of those interventions that we have created show the benefits that can come about from social value and sustainability. But I'm really conscious of time. I've spoken a lot there, so I'm going to hand over to Jess.
I'm just going to jump in very quickly just before you do. Thanks, Ellie. I think it's quite a stark fact that 1.6 million without access to devices. And I think the whole thing around digital isolation also connects those people to social isolation, which I think is a whole entirely different challenge, but I think something else that social value can help address. And it's great to hear Cov Connect as well, which is another organisation that we're working with in Coventry. So yeah, with that, I'd like to hand over to you, Jess.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I won't repeat a lot of what Ellie said, but I think there's a few points that I'd kind of just pick up, in particular with the work that I'm kind of doing at Deloitte and the way I'm trying to kind of embed digital inclusion in the heart of kind of what we do, not just within our government public sector work, but more broadly. So I think, yes, the stats are really stark around those who are digitally excluded. And I think, the purpose of us collaborating with government on the charter was because we've been donating all of our devices since 2021, all of those that are, what we would kind of call end of life. So we're not going to use them anymore. And we've donated over 20,000 devices, which has impacted about 47,000 people, which is phenomenal. But when you compare that to the scale of the 1.6 million without a device, it really is barely a drop in the ocean. And so, there's a kind of, I guess, a call to action there to kind of galvanize others around it. But I think the other kind of intersect here is, in part what we were talking about around the skills piece before. And as I kind of alluded to a little bit in my intro, is that kind of intersect between how are people getting online? How are they then developing skills that are then helping us to achieve broader social issues, including the net zero agenda? And then again, another piece that if anyone has met me or talked to me about digital exclusion before knows I talk a lot about, which is the inclusive design angle, and how are we making sure that everything that is being built, whether that is the skills training angle, whether that is access to new jobs, are being developed in a fully inclusive way, so that we are giving everyone in our communities the opportunity to kind of contribute to these big social issues, including net zero. So I know it sort of perhaps sometimes felt like the digital piece could be a bit of a disconnect, notwithstanding kind of everything that we've talked about in terms of if you reuse devices, it is helping reduce the amount of waste that the UK sends to landfill each year, etc. But I think also just how intrinsic it is to really supporting across all the social value model and all of the government's missions. I won't go on any longer because I know we're quite conscious of time, but I'm sure I can weave some other points into some of the other questions that we've got. So Ben, back to you.
Great, thanks, Jess. So with that, I'm going to head into our third question, which I'm going to target towards John. And this is around sort of collaboration. So we recognize that net zero is a huge ambition, and social value outcomes require collaboration across industry, across sectors, across partners, and also supply chains. So what practical steps can businesses take to embed net zero in their operations? And how can we work with suppliers and partners to sort of scale this impact and make it inclusive?
I think there's probably two parts to that question, Ben. The first one absolutely is the practical steps. And if I was to give not a sermon, but an overview, I think there's 8 things that absolutely can be done there. The first step is to build your understanding internally. Get a deep, or at least a good level of understanding around what does net zero mean? What are the greenhouse gas protocol? What are the elements you need? Then you absolutely have to engage senior leadership teams. So you've got to demonstrate the importance. You've got to help people understand the long-term business benefits of driving towards net zero, whether that's the cost savings that come from transitioning to renewable energy or saving consumption, through to some of the broader things around how do you travel if you've got a group of people. That third block for me is then sort of, you've got to start to focus on how you collect data, how you collate it, how you translate it, and start to think about the processes. Build some clear steps that start to give you the baseline data. And then you can start to use that to build and identify areas for progress. Just in the short term, look at the low-hanging fruit, my 6th point really. How do you take those quick wins and still start to focus on the midterm as well? And then it becomes slightly cyclical, because it's back to revising the way in which you're collecting that data, moving from spend data to more activity data. Technical terms, basically don't calculate it on what you buy, but on what you're actually doing. And use that improved data to revise those plans again building in subparts to drive some real change. And then, as you'd expect with any circular type approach, it is a case of repeating each of those steps again to drive real change. And to do that, you really do need at some point to invest in a carbon accounting platform. And you should seek feedback from peers in your industry, broader opportunities. It is important at some point to make an investment. Spreadsheets will only take you so far. But once that progress is being made, start to seek the expert opinions and guidance. Be careful whose advice you buy, but absolutely start to build your ecosystem around you. I'm happy to make recommendations. They're basically only my opinions, nothing to do with CDW. Second part of your question, those suppliers and partners and the route to scale. I think this is absolutely around building what could be termed a carrot and stick approach. So the opportunity to take a collaborative mindset, to use nudge theory, to drive and ask for things within your supply chain, but also understand where that supply chain is on its own journey. What can be built together? What commonalities do you have? What gaps can be closed? I mentioned in my introduction, which I'm told was quite choppy, which is why I've moved rooms. I'm a huge fan of radical collaboration, and that includes not just your entire supply chain, but your competitors. And in our industry, the distributors, the OEMs, and those we compete against, to use that combined scale of voice to enact a change that in isolation would be really, really difficult to do. And finding the kind of industry boards where you can start to build those partnerships, really, really key. That would be how I would start from zero on that net zero journey.
Great, thanks, John. It's really great to see that actually net zero comes in all elements of business operations, and it's not down to just one or two roles. Actually, you can apply that lens and the social value lens at kind of every stage of your business journey. So it's really great to see. I'm going to come over to you, Rich. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on this one as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, and thank you for those thoughts, John. Really resonated. I think there's a really practical consideration around collaboration with the supply chains that we see day in, day out. When we're looking at a lot of big programs, especially decarbonisation programs or big regeneration or property developments, typically you'll have a tier one contractor that sits at the top, which will represent broadly about 10% of the workforce that's working on that program. The remaining tiers, the tiers 2s, the tier 3s, are often made up of SMEs and micro businesses. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and make a really sweeping statement. And there are, of course, notable exceptions to this, but a lot of SMEs and micro businesses often don't have those long-term workforce plans. So if a lot of your social value commitments can be delivered through SMEs and micro businesses, I think it throws up a really interesting question as to what is the role of that main contractor or that tier one contractor. I think more needs to be done to support those smaller businesses in starting to get organized as far around employment and skills. And I think key to that is the tier one contractors looking at how can they aggregate those demands for skills across multiple organizations, because I think if we can get SMEs and micros working together, we can aggregate up their current and future skills demands. We can create economies of skills, and it's just in really practical ways we can make it a lot easier for them to tackle the chronic and acute skills shortages that we're going to see growing day on day.
Thanks for that, Rich. I think that bridges us quite nicely into kind of the Q&A session. I think some of that is coming through in some of the questions that were being asked. So those of you listening, please encourage you to keep firing the questions over and vote for the ones that you'd like to see us respond to. Fortunately, we've not got time to respond to them all, but we'll try our best. So I'm going to start with Megan's question, which has risen to the top, which is around green jobs. That we want to support people are often more technical and requires potentially more upskilling than sort of traditional ungreen jobs. Do you think this is going to be a problem, and how can we ensure that we aren't leaving the people behind that we want to target through social value? So I'd like to open that up to the panel to get some of their thoughts.
I'm happy to respond to that, unless anyone else wants to.
Go for it, Rich.
Megan, I think it's an absolutely banging question. It is one of the questions around green skills. There's an old Chinese proverb: the best time to plant a tree is 25 years ago. The second best time is today. And I think that's really true in the sort of green skills landscape. A lot of the skills we need several years. If we look at sort of electrical based sort of skills, you know, it takes a good few years for you to qualify as an electrician. There are no shortcuts to this. So I think we've got to think about how do we start investing into that future talent pipeline now. That's going to take quite a few years to manifest and yield. I think what we're starting to see now is organizations are being quite creative around job design. So a good example is solar panels. You know, how can we sort of design programs so that we have people fitting solar panels that don't need to be electricians, but the final mile, if you like, the last bit is delivered by a qualified electrician, but are able to sort of almost create an on-ramp skill-wise and get people skilled up that can be doing a lot of the sort of heavy lifting in terms of the installation of those panels themselves. So I think you're absolutely right. But again, I think it's one of these things that's going to require large-scale collaboration between big developers like British Land to get right. Because I think the more we're able to collaborate with others, and John mentioned, you know, collaborating with competitors, I think the more we can adopt like almost like a sector-led approach around place and start to aggregate the demands that for skills that are going to be had across multiple programs in any one given area, I think the easier it will become for everyone, especially for the education and skills partners that need to be delivering this stuff. But I don't think there are any quick answers, Megan, but I think it's a fantastic question.
Just want to jump in and build on what you said there, Rich, as well. And I think quite often when we look at this, we look at new workforce entering and how do we set the pathways into employment. But we've also got to recognize that the majority of the workforce that we need in 20, 30 years time are in work now. I think, you know, actually we need to focus on sort of reskilling as well around people, but also supply chain. So recognizing that there are existing industries out there, for example, automotive, that have incredible supply chain manufacturing capabilities. And actually a lot of these roles we, you know, sort of anticipate will then move into the green sector, but actually they've got the infrastructure set up to be producing solar, producing heat pumps, you know, they've got the staff that can reskill as well. So I think, you know, there's always other lenses that we can look at this, but absolutely agree with what you said there, Rich. You know, we need to start this as soon as we can, or ideally yesterday. Just want to open up if there's any other final thoughts from the rest of the panel, or if not, we'll move on to another question.
Just a quick one, if I may, Ben. So yeah. I absolutely agree that green jobs, in inverted commas, can be about the technical delivery, but I think we shouldn't lose focus on the ability to innovate, provide thought leadership, to communicate. Otherwise, those projects don't happen to create the delivery type job. And so it's about that growth mindset and seeing difference and seeing change and creating opportunity. And I think that sits at a number of levels through to SLT and leadership. And I think we've got to win that battle as well to drive the growth.
Great, thanks for your reflections there, John. So I'm going to move to Jess's question next, which touches on a question that we sort of thought about as a panel as well coming into this. So thinking about moving towards net zero, what do we see as the biggest future challenge in relation to sort of emerging technologies and potentially their environmental impacts?
Happy to take the first part. Working for a tech company, I guess, be rude of me not to step in to a degree. So I think there's a number of considerations here. AI as a general tool set spans such a breadth of areas, from Gen AI through LLM and data analysis. So I think we need to potentially narrow the lens, but equally, those people using platforms like ChatGPT and Copilot to start to do some of the things which would have been a Google search or other search engines are available. We do need to get a handle on that so that people aren't using these AI tools to do things just because they think it's a better route than using a standard search, because they are significantly thirstier. They are significantly energy hungry. I think the development of the data centers to support particularly Gen AI, I think there is a space for those small nuclear reactor power stations to provide the power, but we need to be really focused on water. And that, I think, is a greater risk than necessarily energy as well. But that would be my starter for 10.
And yeah, and I'm happy to chip in a little bit just to that. I think again the intersect there, it comes back to the skills piece. It's about the education and understanding of, to your point, John, not using a Gen AI tool for what would have been an internet search previously, or and actually understanding how to use those tools, like being able to write useful, succinct, clear prompts that give you the outcome that you want in limited interactions with those kinds of tools. So I think, yes, there is a somewhat negative impact of using some of those tools on the environment, but the more we use them, I think more around education is going to be really key. Education of the impact, but also education of how to use them in the most efficient and effective ways. And actually understanding where they may be able to be beneficial to some of the goals that we're trying to achieve.
May I just come in here as well? It's a slightly more macro view, but I think it's clear that our energy consumption is growing at a sort of near exponential rate, whether it's AI, whether it's electric vehicles, heat pumps and the like. So I think what's really important is that we continue to embrace low carbon means of generating energy, right? Like solar and wind and so on. Now, at the moment, we've got examples of that whole agenda heading the other way. I heard today that in one of the reform-led councils, they have scrapped a solar program, which would have become cost neutral in a small number of years because it's seen as a waste of money. Now, I think when we look at this through the political lens, we're starting to see a lot of sensitivity around the very nature, the very term of net zero, and how sort of palatable that is to certain parts of the electorate. And I think, the one thing that we can be sure of, unless we can start to scale up the energy with the clean, renewable energy that we're using to power these technologies, whether they're AI, heat pumps, or electric vehicles, then we're just going to be dumping more carbon into the atmosphere. So I think it's now more important than ever that we embrace net zero and start to get on with it. What we're seeing in the US on the back of Trump's policies is ChatGPT. Their planning assumption is not to be powering ChatGPT on sort of zero carbon energy sources. They're looking at dirty, frankly, sort of quite dirty fossil fuel powered sort of infrastructure moving forward, which I think is definitely a cause for alarm. So yeah, I think the energy source we need to consider and what's going to be powering these is one of the key questions that I'm holding.
Great, thanks everyone. And conscious of time and looking as a way to sort of summarize our discussion today, really like to do quick reflections from the panel. Just go around and just tell me sort of what do you see as the future of net zero and social value, and what does this look like to you? I'm going to come to you first, Ellie.
Thanks, Ben. I think my reflections would center around like 3 key principles that I would like to see being taken forward. Firstly, the cross-sector collaboration. Like we know that net zero social value, they work best when government, industry, third sector, and local authorities work together. So having that shared goal of meeting net zero commitments and implementing those social value initiatives. My second principle, I think, would be like having a lessons learned culture where in order to deliver those local initiatives, organizations support one another. And I think my final, and this is what I would really like for government to be able to do, this is like in my best case scenario, I would really like for strategic investment in initiatives that promote net zero and social value. Like I would really love for something like the Digital Inclusion Innovation Fund to continue, expand, and just building the link between net zero and promoting social value, making it more established. And yeah, I think that that's how I would like the future to be, is like centered around those 3 principles. But I'm happy to hand over to someone else.
Great, thanks, Ellie. Same question for you then, John.
Yep, so slightly different take, I think. I think that net zero and social value over the next 5-7 years will become more distant cousins. Why do I say that? Because I believe that net zero sustainability programs will have become so ingrained in doing business as normal, and social value must always remain additive and impactful. And so having something which is merely carrying on a program isn't the right way. So I think they will diverge.
Interesting. Thank you, John. Over to you, Jess. Same question.
That is really interesting, John. I remember having a conversation with my colleagues when we were CSR many years ago and talking about embedding purpose into everyday work, that if we got it right, we wouldn't have a job in however many years. And that sort of feels like where we'd love to still go, right? That's the aspiration of talking ourselves out of jobs. I mean, unsurprisingly, maybe mine was really similar to Ellie's about, you know, the kind of public-private third sector collaboration. That's certainly the move that we're really working towards at Deloitte and have done for, you know, quite a number of years. But certainly that's where we're really starting to see the systemic change kind of come. And I think really, I think actually we're all kind of getting on that page now that we can't do all of this on our own. As well-meaning as it is, actually, we really all need to kind of come together. And so, you know, maybe we'll be in a world where John's right, actually, we will really converge. But what I'd like to see actually is us all continue to come together. I think especially in the kind of geopolitical landscape that we're in and the challenges that causes individuals and businesses. But I think it also provides us with the opportunity to really kind of retain our focus and really pull together and yeah, I guess no, that was a really wrong analogy with what's going on in the country, but really just, you know, stand together, I think, on some of these big social issues.
Great, thanks, Jess. Really good points there. And then, Rich, keen to hear what are your future thoughts of net zero and social value?
Well, I'll start on a not entirely positive note and hopefully end on one. But I think a planning assumption that I have, and I think lots of people also share, is that the climate emergency will continue to escalate. Right, the multiple interconnected systems upon which we all rely are going to be impacted with growing regularity and severity. This much we can see. I'm with John. I don't think. I think net zero will be business as usual. People with green skills will become a mainstream thing, similar to how digital skills are also a mainstream thing in most people's roles nowadays. I think the same will be true with green. And I think as things get more challenging, we're going to see the very best of us as human beings. We're going to see us all start to step up with pace and urgency and start working with each other, because we're going to need our best talents coming together to do what we need to do. And I think place-based approaches are going to be where it's at. People coming together around their place, across sectors, with all the talents, getting their shoulder behind the wheel. I look forward to that.
Thanks, Rich. And that was probably my thoughts as well. I think place-based is, I think, where I see this heading. And I think actually it's bringing partners, supply chain and communities on board with that. I think, you know, there's a transition to net zero that isn't just, but I think when you apply the social value lens to it, actually we've got a way of doing something and doing something the right way to benefit those people who need it the most. So just want to say massive thank you to the whole panel for joining me this afternoon. And thank you for all of you who have joined in and tuned into our session to listen to us as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.